You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham, and today's podcast is a doozy. As if I'd ever not say that right. No, but today's podcast is a very good one. We have a special friend of mine, Alan Malai, who will be joining us shortly to talk Big 12 expansion and BYU in particular. So a topic I'm obviously very non-biased towards, right? No, but we are talking Big 12 expansion, BYU in particular, and we're also going to be talking about the NBA playoffs. You know how much I love basketball, so I can't pass up the chance to just talk about the playoffs. How good are these playoffs right now? The Thunder are playing so well. So well. That game last night was so impressive for them to go out and just absolutely stomp the Spurs. I mean, they won 113-99, but the game wasn't even that close. The Spurs just got ran out of the building, and then they had the Spurs won the fourth quarter 34-22 to make it look a little bit interesting, but ultimately the Thunder just ran that game from start to finish, and they looked as strong as ever. They looked like they could actually challenge the Warriors a little bit, maybe. I want to get your takes on that. Hit me up on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. There's the plug. Just straight up follow me on Twitter. At Sean Bingham, SeanBingham. We also have a cool Instagram account. It's just STB Sports Take on Instagram, STB Sports Take. We post some cool stuff there to just follow along with as well for those of you that are on the Instagram. But anyway, the NBA playoffs are so good right now, and the Warriors look strong. Obviously, Steph Curry had his night there a couple nights ago when he came back and dropped 17 in the overtime to beat the Blazers. And then they finished the series off at home just a couple nights later when he got his MVP trophy, much deserving MVP. But it's going to be an interesting Western Conference Finals because everybody was expecting Spurs Warriors. But the Thunder have this feel to them, kind of like Jordan and Pippen and the boys did, Horace Grant and them, back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when they were just struggling to get past the Pistons. Just they couldn't beat Isaiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer and Joe Dumars and those guys. Rodman was part of that team, the Pistons team. And finally, Jordan gets over the hump. Finally, they beat the Pistons, and there was just no stopping them from that point on. There was just no stopping them. And you got to think a guy like Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, they're superstars. Those guys are absolute superstars. They are two of the five best players in the league, in my opinion. I mean, let's just discuss who would be the top five players in the league right now. Obviously, Steph Curry, LeBron James. I mean, do you put Durant and Westbrook next? I mean, there's so many. I mean, you've got guys, that like Anthony Davis, whose team didn't even make the playoffs. He's obviously a really good player. There's a handful of guys that could be in the conversation, but I think I would put Westbrook and Durant both in the top five. I wouldn't put Klay Thompson in the top five. I wouldn't put Draymond Green in the top five. Kawhi Leonard would make my top five. Draymond Green would be really, really close. He'd probably be around the 6 or 7 or 8 spot. But you've got two guys there in Oklahoma City that are superstars. Russell Westbrook is a triple-double waiting to happen. Durant is an incredible scorer. He's got the clutch factor going with him now. And they're not having those late-game letdowns that they had all season long. They're finishing games on the road against the Spurs. They beat the Spurs twice in San Antonio. Twice. I mean, that's crazy because they lost a home game, but they beat them in San Antonio twice. The Spurs were 41-1 at home this year. 40-1 at home this year. 40-1. And the Thunder beat them twice in a 6-game, what turned out to be a 6-game series at home. Or at San Antonio. So, I mean, it's just the Thunder are playing so well right now. They're not having the late game letdown. They're finishing games. They're finishing teams. They're finishing series. And they're looking strong. And they're looking like a team. And I'd be a little bit nervous if I was Golden State, I think that the Thunder are going to give Golden State a far better matchup than the Spurs would have. San Antonio and Oklahoma City were both 1-3 against Golden State this year. So obviously Golden State had everybody's number. You don't go 73-9 without having everybody's number. But the Thunder are good. They're really good. So don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say that the Thunder are going to win the series, because unless Steph Curry gets injured again and can't play for 2 or 3 games, the Warriors are going to win that series if Steph Curry is healthy. But if he's not, or if he has to miss a game or two, don't be surprised if the Thunder steal that series, because they look poised to go on to that next level and win a championship. And it's interesting that if they do, it could be an absolute game changer for their franchise for the next decade. Because if they did somehow beat the Warriors, and they did go on and beat the Cavs, and they won their first NBA championship, and all of a sudden Durant and Westbrook are now like they've arrived, like they're title winners now. And why would they leave? Why would they not stay there and defend their title? But if they lose, I can see them looking for greener pastures, more money, better situation, blah blah blah. So it's going to be interesting in OKC, but I do think that winning that series against the Spurs was a huge, huge momentum builder for them as a franchise. I do think they're going to lose to the Warriors probably in 6 games. I'm always hesitate to choose 6 games when I'm choosing the home team to win, because game 6 will be on the road for the home team, and closing out a series on the road is never easy. But I want to give the Thunder enough credit to say that they're going to win 2 games. But I don't know. Maybe it ends in 5. Maybe it goes 7. But I'm going to go with 6 to just play it safe, in the middle of those 2. So I'm going to say Warriors win it in 6. But I'll say this. If Steph Curry is not healthy, the Thunder will win the series. That's my little caveat. If Steph Curry, I think Steph Curry is so deserving of the MVP. I think that the Warriors are obviously still a top, 5, for sure top 10, maybe top 5 team in the league without him. But they're not the Warriors without him. They're truly not. Sure, they can beat the Blazers without him, but I don't even think they could have beat a healthy Clipper team without Steph Curry, So, and he came back and did his thing, and he's just incredible. The shots he gets up, the quickness of his release, his ability to break free and shake guys for just that split second with his ball handling is so unorthodox, and it's so different, and it's so unique to anything we've ever seen, that it almost doesn't look as fluid and one mixtape pretty, and but it's so effective. So effective. I mean, he can break free from anybody and give himself just enough space to get off the quickest release in the history of the game, and it's just like butter every time. It's like the shots he's taking at any other level by any other player, you'd be like, what are you doing, you selfish idiot? But with Steph Curry, it's like not that way at all. Like he makes them. He makes them at a very high percentage. You want him taking those shots. Even as a teammate, you're like, "Oh, shoot it, man! Like it's fun. I'm having fun watching you. I'm gonna put my hands up and run back down on defense before it even goes through the hoop, because I'm so confident you're gonna make it." That's what they're doing in Golden State right now. That's how confident they are in him. And then you look at guys like Draymond Green, who I think is for sure their second most important player, their second best player, and Klay Thompson, and Harrison Barnes, and Andre Iguodala, and even Spates is hitting threes, big man off the bench, getting, maybe 20 minutes a game type of thing. They don't have a guy that can't hit a three-pointer. It's incredible. That team is so good. Like, it's going to be interesting to see if they can defend their title, because 73-9 will mean nothing if they don't. Ask the Patriots of like 2000, whatever that was, 7 or something like that, when they went 16-0 and then 18-0 through the AFC Championship game and then lost the Super Bowl to the Giants. You don't win the title, and that 73-9 is literally meaningless. Like, nobody cares. It's forgotten. You're not even in the conversation for best team ever because you didn't win the championship. There'll be 100 teams picked ahead of you for greatest team ever, because you got to win the title to be the greatest team ever, right? So they want to defend that title. But then you get a guy like LeBron James, okay? LeBron, he's hurting inside. He has his backhanded compliment to Steph Curry the other day saying, oh yeah, he's very deserving of the MVP. It doesn't necessarily mean he's the best. He basically said Steph Curry's not the best player, I am. He didn't say that, but he might as well have. saying that the word valuable, it can be interpreted in so many different ways and blah, blah, blah. But LeBron, I had a friend text me the other night saying how important is it for LeBron's legacy to beat Curry in these finals. And I said, it is important, but LeBron for sure has to win another title. He can't go. He's going to make the finals this year. We know he is. I don't see the Heat or the Raptors even putting up much of a fight in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think the Cavs will win that one in 5. So the Cavs are going to the finals again. LeBron's already 2-4 in the finals. You can't go 2-5. You can't go 2-5 unless you're going to come back the next year and make it 3-5, and then maybe the next year make it 4-5, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, the guy went to 9 finals and won 4 titles. Like, he's the man. But if he ends his career and he's been to 7 finals and only won 2 of them, I'm sorry, but you just can't be in the conversation for greatest ever. And the other thing I was saying the other day to this same friend, the Eastern Conference is so weak, and it has been so weak for so long. For LeBron to go to 5 or 6 or 10 straight finals, I just don't really care. You put him in the West, you put his teams in the West, and they're losing in the second round a lot of those years. Especially the Cavs team of before he went to the Heat. Those 4 Heat teams were legit. They should have won the title every year. They were very, very good. And of course they won 2 of them. But his Cavs team that went to the finals before he went to the Heat, like that team wouldn't even make it out of the second round in this year's Western Conference. This year's Cavs team is really, really good. They've got everybody healthy. They've got Kyrie. They've got Kevin Love. They've got LeBron. They don't have any excuses to lose this year. And they're looking strong. I think it's going to be a great finals. I'm predicting, of course, the Warriors and the Cavs. I do think that the Thunder could put up a fight. I don't think that anyone in the Eastern Conference other than the Cavs could. So to me, even though there's Raptors, Heat, Cavs, Warriors, and Thunder all left, to me there's really the Cavs, the Warriors, and the Thunder. The other 2 Eastern Conference teams are just irrelevant. But Game 6 is tonight, and we'll see what happens there. I'm rooting for the Heat because I like Dwayne Wade. But LeBron has been in the Eastern Conference taking advantage of, and that's why I think he stayed obviously he went back to Cleveland. He loves Cleveland and all that stuff. But I feel like he's not even considering ever in his whole career. I don't think he's ever considered a Western Conference team because it's always been the tougher conference. And if you want to win a championship, you have to make it to the finals. And so why not, I don't blame him, why not give yourself a 50% chance of winning the title every single year? That's what I was saying in this same conversation. Why not, if I'm Vegas, if I'm an odds maker in Vegas, I'm putting the Cavs with a 50% chance to win the title every single year because they're going to make it to the finals. There's nobody there to challenge them. There's one superstar in the Eastern Conference, LeBron James. Who else is a superstar in the Eastern Conference? A true, legitimate superstar. There's no Steph Curry. There's no Kevin Durant. There's no Russell Westbrook. There's no Kawhi Leonard. All these guys we talked about, Anthony Davis, there's none of those guys. Even James Harden, who I think is a joke of a superstar, even he's in the Western Conference. They're all in the Western Conference. So LeBron has, it's a cakewalk to get to the finals every year for him, giving the Cavs a 50% chance every single year of winning the championship. So it's going to be interesting for his legacy to see how that plays out this year because going 2-5 is not cool. That is not going to bode well for his legacy to be 2-5. And if you can't beat the best, then you aren't the best. Steph Curry is the best right now. LeBron knows it. LeBron hates it. He wants to beat him. So we'll dive into that another time. But we've got a great interview coming up with Alan Malai. So let's transition real quick to the Big 12 and BYU expansion. I blogged about this a year ago. It was just after Baylor and TCU got snubbed from the college football playoff, and it was just so painfully obvious that they needed to expand and add another team. And so I blogged about it, and I just talked about how, in my opinion, my very strong opinion, the Big 12 needs BYU. And I put it to a vote. The poll question was, which is still up on the blog, it said, it was who needs who. The Big 12 needs BYU, BYU needs the Big 12, or they both need each other equally. 46% said they need each other equally, 41% said BYU needs the Big 12, and 40% said BYU needs the Big 12, and 14% said the Big 12 needs BYU. I think they need each other equally. Obviously, you know, I'm a BYU fan, and so I'm going to be a little biased. But to me, you could make a very strong argument that the Big 12 needs BYU every bit as much as BYU needs them. You know, I made the argument a year ago that it was the Big 12 needing them more. And I think, you know, being more realistic, more diplomatic about it, they need each other equally, but 10 teams is hurting them. They made it in this year, Choklahoma. They got into the playoff and they got stomped by 20 by Clemson. But the Big 12, I look back to 2014, okay, because it's the best example. I know it was, you know, not last season, but the season before. But TCU and Baylor got snubbed. If they had played again in a conference championship game, there is zero question that the winner of that game would have gone on to the college football playoff instead of Ohio State. Now, Ohio State went on to win the national championship that year, so they were obviously a deserving team in that playoff. But I'm telling you with absolute certainty that if Baylor and TCU had played a 13th game, a conference championship game against each other, a rematch for the conference championship, there's no question that the winner of that game would have taken Ohio State's place in the college football playoff that year. No question. So that alone is reason to add 2 teams, add a conference championship game, strengthen your conference. Don't be a small 10-team conference. All the Power 5 conferences have 12-plus teams. Get 12 teams, get divisions, and go be a Power 5 conference. Have 12 teams. And BYU is far and away, without question, the best option for them. It's just not even up for debate in my mind. And so I'm going to go through these same numbers. So some of these have changed a little bit, and so I'll try and correct them where I need to. But first thing is BYU has a winning tradition. You know, last year they were 90-38 leading into, you know, at the blog for the last 10 years. That's a winning percentage of 703. Last year BYU went 9-4. So they're adding to this legacy of they have a winning tradition. They've been to a bowl game each of the last 11 years with a winning record of 6-5 in those 11 bowl games. 0-2 in the last 2 years, which is unfortunate, but they're doing well. They've finished in the top 25 5 times in the last 11 years now. They're 3-1 against Texas and Oklahoma since 2009. Texas and Oklahoma are the pride and joy of the Big 12, and BYU is 3-1 against them in football. BYU's LaVell Edwards Stadium holds 63,725 people. That would be in the top, I think, 3 or 4 stadiums in the Big 12. BYU is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, that has 6.4 million members in the United States alone. I'm not saying all those people cheer for them, but they are widespread, and BYU is a national brand. There is zero question about that. There's zero question about that, just like there's zero question about TCU and Baylor getting into the college football playoff 2 years ago if they had done a conference championship game. BYU is in every state popular. Every state has BYU fans, more so than any school in the country, I would argue. Maybe Notre Dame is up there. You know, and then there's the occasional bandwagon where it's like, oh, I love USC because Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart are there, and then all of a sudden nobody's a USC fan anymore. Or, oh, I love Oregon because they like run really fast and score lots of touchdowns until 2 years later when they don't, and we're not fans of them anymore. BYU is a national brand with loyal fans all around the country. So the eyeballs are there to watch games. The fan base is there. They travel well. They have a winning tradition. They're good at basketball. They have a large enrollment of 30,000 plus. They have a large stadium. There's literally nothing holding them back. Okay, they don't play on Sunday. Big deal. No football games are on Sunday. And the occasional basketball game, just schedule them on a Saturday or a Monday and you'll be just fine. Baseball game's the same. there's 25 people in attendance at the baseball games. I think they're going to be okay playing the games not on a Sunday. So there's nothing standing in the way of BYU adding to the Big 12. The Big 12 would be crazy to not invite them. I think it's clear they're going to invite someone, but we'll see who it is. Even Barry Switzer came out and made it clear that BYU should be the top team. It's just who's going to be that 12th. So I want to bring in my good friend Alan. He's a very smart football guy, very smart sports guy. I'm going to have him on the show a lot more. All right, and with that, we bring in my good friend and a college football expert, Alan Malai. Alan, thanks for joining us here on Simply the Best Sports Podcast. We've been talking about this for far too long. Glad to finally have you on the podcast.
Good to be here, man. Good to be here.
Dude, so we're talking all about, now I know we need to give all of the listeners here a disclaimer. Alan, you probably recognize him from the blog. He is a Ute. He's a Utah fan. That's fine. He understands football. He understands the conferences. So we're going to give our very unbiased opinion about the Big 12 and about BYU in particular joining the Big 12. But Alan's done a lot of extensive research on the different conferences and some of the realignment that could and should take place. But the big talk right now, Alan, is the Big 12, and they're the Big 12 with 10 teams, right? So do they need 2 more teams? Do they need that conference championship game? Are they hurting themselves by only having 10 teams? Like, what's your take on their situation? Do they need a BYU, or are they fine without them?
Well, that's the question. The Big 12 just had their meetings over in Phoenix just last week, and they actually hired an analytics firm to answer that very question. And what they came up with was that if they had a 12-team league with an 8-game conference schedule and a championship game, that would be the best model for putting one of their teams in the college football playoff. Now, the analytics firm that came up with that algorithm that determined that would be their best route to a championship actually has correctly predicted every team the last 2 years in the college football playoffs, so they know what they're talking about.
Wow.
So my opinion, yes, I think they do. And I don't think it's just because they want teams just to grow. I think that in order to stay relevant, in order to keep that conference strong, 10 years from now, you've got people within the conference not putting names to it, saying that 10 years from now they might not be relevant if they don't expand. So I think they need to expand, but there's a lot of hurdles getting there.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't want to see them turn into the Big 10, which is really like the Big 86 or however many teams are in that conference now. Because then you get, they have, with Iowa last year, I don't even want to dive into their schedule. It was like the most cupcake schedule in the history of a Power 5 conference. But they played their conference schedule, and the Big 10 was actually pretty good last year. But somehow Iowa didn't play Michigan, didn't play Michigan State, didn't play Ohio State. They just kind of snuck through the season without having to play any tough teams within their own conference. But I do think that the Big 12, when we look at 2014, and I blogged about this a year ago when the Big 12 got snubbed. They had Baylor and TCU that both seemed like they were fighting for that final playoff spot. TCU was ranked 3rd, and they beat Iowa State 55-3 in their final game. Baylor was number 6, and they beat number 9 Kansas by 11, 38-27. So they beat a ranked team by 11, and TCU stomped on a team by 52 points. But then somehow Ohio State does a leapfrog.
They dropped from 3 to 6. Yeah, TCU dropped from 3 to 6, and Ohio State snuck in instead.
Yeah, it was so weird. It was like, hey, we're gonna. It was like the committee finally wanted to acknowledge, oh, you know what? We're actually going to honor that head-to-head meeting where Baylor beat TCU, and so we're gonna give them the number 5 ranking, and we'll have TCU be number 6. But oh, by the way, we're putting Ohio State at number 4. And they had to do it, and we all know that Ohio State went on to win the national championship, so they got it right. But you can't tell me that if the Big 12 had a conference championship game set up that year for TCU and Baylor to play each other again, you can't tell me that the winner of that game wouldn't have gone over Ohio State.
100%. The winner of that game would have got in, and there's no way that the College Football Playoff Committee could have kept them out.
Absolutely.
Not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Year one, the Big 12 was snubbed. Year two, they got a team in, and then obviously Oklahoma got smashed.
Choklahoma choked, as they always do.
Choklahoma. He didn't talk like that, going to make Saban real happy.
So let's talk about BYU. I mean, I'm obviously a BYU fan. I'm a little biased, we know that, but I'm trying to be diplomatic about this.
And to be fair, I've had a lot of family play for both squads, so I like both teams. When they play together, I'll root for Utah, but I got love for both sides.
Okay, I can appreciate that. So I'm looking at BYU's schedule from last year, 2015 schedule, and
right.
Unfortunately, I got to just admit to myself and to all the people out there that think BYU's like destined to win a national championship at any moment. We lost. I say we. I shouldn't do that on the air here. BYU lost every game they played against a Power 5 school except the Hail Mary against Nebraska to open the season. They lost to UCLA, right. Lost to Michigan, lost to Missouri, lost to Utah. So do they really belong in a Power 5 conference?
Unequivocally, yes, they do. Since 1980, no team has won more games than BYU except for 5 schools. Florida State, Michigan, and Miami, a few other teams. And those are all blue bloods of college football. Like, BYU belongs in the discussion of Power 5 teams. They're there.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why they're, in my opinion, why they're losing these teams against Power 5 players is because they're not recruiting Power 5 players. Mm-hmm. They're BYU's in this weird spot, really for the first time in their history, where they're better than everyone they're playing in the Group of 5, but they're not quite as good as everyone they're playing in the Power 5.
Mm-hmm.
And they're playing good Power 5 teams. If they're playing lower level Power 5 teams, they'd win those games, and I don't think there's any question there. But they lack the talent and the depth that comes with recruiting in a Power 5 conference to play against a Utah and win consistently, to play against a UCLA and win consistently, and Arizona even. All 3 of those teams, which they're playing next year versus the Pac-12. So they're moving up. And if they can keep scheduling well, they might not need to get into a conference, living the dream, playing blue bloods throughout every conference of the Power 5. But
you got to start winning, though. You got to start winning.
You got to start winning. And Utah's a great example. They've kind of laid the path. Utah and TCU, really, they've laid the path of those teams coming from the Group of 5 and getting into the Power 5 and coming in struggling a little bit at first, and then boom, suddenly they're ranked 5th in the nation. They're competing for the college football playoffs. They're beating Stanford. They're beating USC. They're beating Baylor. They're beating Texas. They're beating Oklahoma. And BYU has the ability to do that. I think to do that at that level and to do it consistently, they have to get into a conference. They just have to.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's interesting, and that's another thing I put actually in the blog post from last year was the TCU-Utah comparison that you just made. Those 3 teams, BYU being the third, BYU, Utah, TCU, they battled year after year after year for Mountain West supremacy. And BYU really kind of had everyone's number for a while there, winning the conference championship a number of times. But it was those 3 teams definitely at the top, Even and you look at how TCU transitioned over to the Big 12, and they're like the top team. 2 years ago they for sure were. Last year they were, probably second best team in the conference. And Utah was right there in the discussion this year. They kind of had a late season letdown, but they still finished they finished 3rd in the Pac-12 last year? 5th? What was it? I know it's all kind of tight there at the top, but
gosh, I think they ended up finishing 3rd.
Yeah, but regardless of whether it was 3rd or 5th or whatever, we know that Utah was very much in the Pac-12 race. And so it's interesting to think that why shouldn't BYU have that same capability, like you said, when they have the ability to recruit better players? Now, if you look at it from a basketball standpoint, I know we're talking more about football, but I think if BYU made this transition, it would be for football and basketball. And you look at a guy like Jabari Parker, for instance, was just in town. He's obviously plays for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he went to Duke. But he's a Mormon kid, and BYU is very much on his radar. And I feel like a guy like that chooses BYU over Duke if BYU is in a Power 5 conference where they're getting just as much exposure. Maybe not quite as much as Duke, because Duke is Duke. But I do think that,
Duke, right.
And we've got Frank Jackson. He lives just right here in Utah County, and we just lost him to Duke as well. And so you got to think that these guys that are Mormon kids, especially because BYU is obviously a Mormon school, you got to think that if when they're that talented, if they have the opportunity to go to a school that not only is a school they've really wanted to go to their whole lives because of the culture and the religion and things like that kind of draw them to it. But then also there's the added bonus of not only is all that good stuff there that their parents are pushing them towards, but hey, look, I'm also going to get all this exposure on national television. I'm in a major conference. I'm nationally relevant. I think that those recruits start to more and more of them at least choose BYU. Maybe the extreme outliers still choose a Stanford or a Notre Dame or a Alabama or Ohio State over BYU, but I think a lot of them, we'd be able to get at least some 4-star recruits and stuff to come to Provo.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if you look at recruiting, especially with BYU hiring Kalani Sitake, recruiting is just going to get better. He's already proved it with this year's recruiting class. He landed Jonah Trineman, Hanson Tanielu, both from Snow College, 4- or 5-star JUCO recruits. If you add in Kalani's recruiting ability with a Big 12 membership, I mean, you're looking at a total change in BYU's recruiting landscape beyond what we've already seen. And, I think, like you said, I like Utah, I like BYU, I like both schools, but I'm a bigger fan of the rivalry more than I am of one team in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I've stoked the Flames many times in the past, trying to get Taysom Hill to come to Utah, but it's just fun for me. I think BYU getting into a power conference is the best thing that could happen to this rivalry, because look at the greatest rivalries we have in America right now. We have Florida State, Miami, Texas, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, probably the biggest. These guys are all in Power 5 conferences together. Some are even in the same division. It doesn't hurt them because both teams are in a Power 5 conference. It makes each team better, and then each team has this fear of loss, like, oh my gosh, Urban Meyer's recruiting all these studs. We need to go get Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, yeah.
And it happens. And now look where Michigan is at.
Yep. 1
year removed from Brady Hoke. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Michigan. I mean, that's a conversation for another day. But they're one fluke play away from playing in that Big Ten championship game and quite likely being the team that ended up in the college football playoff. Because that Michigan State. Remember that the Michigan State punter fumbles the ball, man. And Michigan's punter fumbles the snap, and Michigan State scoops it up and scores. And
so I'm sitting with some friends. We're all in the living room and we're watching the games. And my buddy is the biggest Michigan homer I know, and he's so into the game he can't hear it. And he's like he is salt of the earth dude, but he becomes this vile demon when he watches Michigan football. So he goes up into his bedroom to watch the fourth quarter. And apparently his broadcast was 10, 15 seconds ahead of us. So about 20 of us are all watching the game. Game over. They're going to punt. and suddenly we hear this barrage of F-bombs and screaming and hitting the wall. No. What's happening? And then boom, it happens live in front of the TV. It was completely silent. I've never seen a room full of people. Everyone had their jaws dropped.
Yeah,
it was the coolest thing in the world. But that's why we love college football. It's a rivalry. Right?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's what makes it so great. And yeah. But I mean, as far as expansion goes, I mean, BYU is the number one candidate. They're topping everyone's list. If you do a Google search,
no, totally. We had, Barry Switzer came out yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, made it very clear that BYU is the top choice. It would be stupid to even consider anyone else above them, and then it's just kind of a battle for who gets to be the next team in. But and I agree with it. But I look at I'm looking at like a Boise State. Are they more deserving?
Well. So there's a couple factors that are playing into conference expansion. First and foremost, it's America. We know that football drives expansion, drives teams jumping from conference to conference. It's not it's not basketball. It's not anything else. It's not the Olympic sports. It's football. So from a football perspective, Boise State makes the most sense. Geographically, they're close to BYU. They're one of the most winning teams since I think it's 1999. Nobody's won more football games since 1999. Yeah. They're the second team to break into the BCS. They did it twice as well, just like Utah did.
And they did it with style. I mean, man, I'll never forget that game they beat Oklahoma. Adrian Peterson was on that Oklahoma team. That was an incredible game.
Talk to Adrian Peterson about it now. He still hates it. He still hates it. Like he has nightmares about it still.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they did it with style. The problem with Boise State is football wise they deserve it, but their stadium is so tiny, their enrollment is tiny. They don't bring anything to the table to the conference aside from just football.
Yep.
And so the truth of the matter is, if we've been talking about Big 12 expansion for probably about a year and a half now. Only recently is it actually becoming a reality. The problem is, if there was a legitimate candidate out there that made 100% sense to the Big 12, they would have been invited already. And so that's the problem they're facing. BYU makes sense. I mean, they have the fourth largest stadium with 63,000 plus.
Yeah.
In the Big 12, they have the enrollment, they have the football resume, they have the tradition. They're the biggest things that BYU has going against them are two things. They are 872 miles away from Lubbock, Texas. That'd be their closest opponent. They're over 1,900 miles away from West Virginia. So we're looking at distance as a problem. Which personally,
I would argue that West Virginia is the one out of the range. But they're already in the conference. So.
But they're already in the conference. The second thing is Sunday play for other sports, but from people I've talked to, that shouldn't be a big deal. They can schedule around it. They can make it work. So the third problem is,
this is 2016. Planes work pretty well, and things like that.
Yeah. But I think we are looking at an expansion. I think we are looking at BYU getting included. It's been talked about. We've heard rumors of wars, and is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Who knows?
Thank you for the second coming analogy there.
You're welcome. Hey, we're in Utah, right? But also, I think we are going to see the Big 12 expand, or at least make a decision on expansion. And
how soon do you think we'll hear something, and how soon will it actually take effect? Is this something that could change BYU's 2016 schedule, or is it something that's going to be a 2017 thing?
We're probably looking at a 2017, 2018. Remember when Utah was accepted into the Pac-12, they were 2 seasons away before they joined, right?
Yeah.
So we're probably looking at the same thing. As far as the timeline and when Bowlesby, the commissioner of the Big 12, makes a decision, we're probably looking at the end of the summer, is what he said, is where they actually decide. And then I don't think they're in any patient mood to wait. I think as soon as they decide, those teams will probably be in for the 2017. Just my guess, but it could be 2018.
Yeah, I would think that if they're going to do it, they want to do it sooner rather than later, because I think the Big 12 fears they're being left out of conversations that they feel they shouldn't be left out of as a result of having a smaller conference. And so you'd think there'd be some urgency there, but maybe I'm wrong.
I agree. So David Boren, he's the president of Oklahoma. He's also the new Big 12 board chairman. And he's been the biggest proponent of expansion in the Big 12. He wants to add a championship game. He wants to add a conference network, because the Big 12 doesn't have a conference network. he's come out and said recently, David Bourne has said that until the Big 12 does all three of those things, they'll be psychologically disadvantaged.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with them. That's why they're having all these meetings right now, is because they feel psychologically disadvantaged. And they're right. I mean, look, the Big Ten, the SEC, those guys are making so much money with their television networks right now, anywhere between $8 to $10 million per school, and it's growing. That's year one. You know,
Wow.
The Big 12 doesn't have a network. Like, you need that revenue to keep schools.
Yeah.
I mean,
now
BYU
does have a network, and I've heard, maybe you know more about this than me, but BYU does have a network. It's a rather robust network, BYU TV. Is that hurting BYU's chance at getting in, or is it helping? I've heard that the Big 12 doesn't like that.
So they're not fans of it because they've had such a poor experience with the Longhorn Network. That's obviously Texas's network.
Yeah.
But you know, TV rights are split into tiers: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and BYU's TV network fits into their Tier 3 model.
Okay.
You know, if they were to get a network started, so it's like BYU having their own TV network is like Sunday Play. They can figure it out.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, and the Sunday Play should not be a factor. It's like, okay, the occasional basketball game has to get rescheduled. Who cares? You know.
Where I think the burden lies is on BYU. So I've talked to former players, even some coaches, and I can't name any names, but they said back 6 years ago, when Utah was being courted by the Pac-12, BYU was also getting courted by the Big 12 and the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me 100% that Utah, I digress. The Pac-12 said, all right, Utah, if you want to be part of the Pac-12, we need this, and this, and you're not going to be a full member, and you're not going to take part of all of our earnings until 3 or 4 years in, and this needs to happen. And Utah basically bowed their head and said, okay, we'll do whatever we need to do. Let's make it happen. And 5 years later, they're a full member, and things are going good up on the hill, you know?
Yeah.
Where BYU, what I was told from people who know, came in, and they actually started making demands. Like, we want this, we're BYU. And BYU's got to come in. If that's true, and I trust my sources 100%, if that's true, that BYU was close to an offer, but they basically slapped the hand that was about to feed them, shame on BYU. Like, they need to come in humble. They need to be like, look, we realize that we don't play on Sunday. We realize that we've got a network. We want it to work. Let's figure it out. We're willing to do anything, you know, because like I said, BYU needs to get into a conference.
Yeah.
And you know, BYU's mission is to spread the gospel of the Mormon Church more than football.
Mm-hmm.
But being in the conference helps them do that.
Yeah, it makes them more relevant for sure.
It makes them more relevant. They get more national notoriety. It's just going to spread their brand and spread the gospel a lot more. And football-wise, we've already gone over how well that's going to help out with that.
Yeah, and they do value football. There's obviously a lot of revenue in football, and I think all that increases as well. You know, so let me ask you this. You know, I another thing came up in my mind as you were talking. I think it's clear that BYU belongs in a Power 5 conference, and I think the Big 12 is the perfect fit. Sounds like you agree. It sounds like Barry Switzer and many other agree. And I think that the Big 12 needs them. The problem is they don't need 11 teams. They need 12. Is there a 12th team that really helps the process as well, that really helps the Big 12? Because you hear teams like, oh, Boise State or Cincinnati or, you know, Memphis is making a big push. And it's like, I don't really see any of those. Cincinnati's one that I could make an argument for, but I don't see many teams helping the Big 12 like I think BYU can, for the same reasons that you just went over. There's a huge stadium, a huge national fan base. So if there's not a 12th team to join, does the Big 12 say, hey, you know what, we're, as much as we want BYU, we're better off with 10 than we are with 11, and we're better off with 10 than we are with 12, with the 12th one being we add nothing to the, we bring nothing to the table type school?
So the quick answer is, That no, BYU doesn't have a natural partner. They don't have anyone to bring in with them. That makes sense. Even Cincinnati, that probably makes the most sense as the next school to add, is so far from BYU. Like the Big 12 really.
But they are close to West Virginia.
They are close to West Virginia, and that might even put them in the lead. And so I mean they're only. I think they're only about 300 miles from Morgantown.
Yeah.
So and their stadium seats 40,000 people. It's not huge, but it's not small. So you're looking at a school that makes sense geographically more than football wise, where BYU makes the most sense football wise, brand wise. And so there's all these factors coming in. Do I think the Big 12 will say that they're just better at 10 schools? No, I think. Remember, just a few years ago, Texas A&M left, Nebraska left, Missouri left.
Yeah.
All these regional, blue blood Big 12 programs left. And I think the Big 12 is going through the same inferiority complex where they're afraid teams might leave again. And if they don't strengthen the conference, it's going to happen. Can you imagine a Big 12 where Texas and Oklahoma leave?
Oh, it's done at that point.
They're dead. They are absolutely dead.
Yeah, it's just like the Mountain West when they lost TCU, Utah, BYU. They became completely irrelevant.
Completely irrelevant, and that's exactly what would happen to the Big 12. It almost happened during conference realignment 5 years ago when Larry Scott of the Pac-12 was trying to bring over Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It was almost done until at the very last second, the 11th hour, Texas decided to stay, so Oklahoma decided to stay, and everything, the status quo didn't change.
Yeah.
But they see that on the horizon again. They see it coming if they don't take action now. And they all agree, especially with the new analytics they got from this research firm, they all agree that expanding is the way to do that. Getting people into the college football playoff is the way to do that. Becoming relevant as a conference and strong as a conference. So I'm more confident now than I've been in the last 2 years that the Big 12 is going to expand, and I don't know how. I don't know how you leave BYU out of it. Yeah. I just don't.
I don't either. And the only thing I can think is that it would be something that that BYU is just not willing to bend on, something church related is a bigger deal to them. Yeah. And that stuff's not always disclosed to the public, but sure. It is interesting to think about the 12th school,
Yeah, I think, one that makes geographical sense but doesn't really make a ton of other sense is Colorado State.
Yeah.
They're close to BYU. They're semi-close to Kansas. They have an enrollment that's a little bit bigger than BYU's. Problem is their record over the last few years is almost 500.
Yeah, they're just not a good school.
Yeah, and their stadium only seats 34,000.
Yeah.
So they don't make a lot of football sense, but they make a lot of geographical sense.
Maybe we can just get the Utes to join and leave the Pac-12.
What's that?
I said maybe we should just get the Utes to leave and go to the Big 12 instead of the Pac-12.
Oh man, dude, we can't do it. I love playing USC and UCLA.
I know. It's no, the Pac-12 is awesome. It would be great to have BYU and Utah in the same conference again. There was so much more added to the rivalry with that, but I don't think it'll ever be the same. But it's okay.
Dude, in my utopian dreamland of college football, the FBS would split into two new divisions, and we would restore regional rivalries. We would have 14-team conferences and only have 4 conferences instead of 5. And we would have college football playoffs, 2 national championships, and just blow everything out of the water. Yeah. I think if we did that, college football would become king.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I've looked at all the stuff you've put together. It's pretty cool stuff. I'd actually like to have you on a second time to talk about that. We're running out of time here for today, but we should have you on again. So, well, let me ask you one final question before we let you go here, Alan. If you were to if you were to say one team, we've kind of talked about a Cincinnati, a Colorado State, a Boise State. If it were you, right. if you're Bowlesby, It's your decision. Who are you extending the invitation to? BYU, you've made it clear that it's BYU, but you've mentioned a few others, and I just want to kind of put you on the spot and make you pick that final 12th team. Who are you picking? Taking everything into account, geographic, stadium size, winning percentage, program, history, everything.
Aside, that's a tough question, my man. Aside from taking a current Power 5 team from another school.
Yeah, no, you can't. It's something that's realistic,
Which isn't going to happen. If I was going to take another one, it won't be Houston. The Texas schools don't want to add another recruiting rival in that breadbasket.
Mm-hmm.
It'd probably be Cincinnati, and I think if I'm Bowlesby, I take Cincinnati. I get into that Ohio recruiting market. I get into the Big Ten ground, and I put up with BYU being far away. I just do.
Yeah.
And you know what? If I don't take BYU, I probably go with one of the Florida schools, USF or UCF, Central Florida or Southern Florida.
Yeah.
And then I add another school over there in that area. And those guys are both on the list. So,
yep.
But I think BYU, they're not a shoo-in. There's obstacles to overcome, and like I said, they need to be willing to work with the Big 12 on some things, and vice versa. But I would probably add Cincinnati with BYU.
I like it.
Sure.
I think that's the best choice too. I actually lied. I have one more question. Who's going to win the Western Conference Finals, the Warriors or the Thunder?
Oh man. Dude, first of all, how exciting is this series going to be, right?
Oh, it's going to be amazing. The Thunder are playing so well right now that I actually think they could give the Warriors a run for their money.
Oh, absolutely. And they're so fast. They're so athletic. Russell Westbrook is the most athletic dude in the NBA.
In the world.
So we're looking at in the world, probably in the world.
Yeah, he's a freak. He's a freak of an athlete.
He looks like a Marvel superhero on the hardwood. Man, if I was going to pick a team, I can't go against the Warriors just because Steph Curry has that. I mean, how do you fight against a shooter like that? But yeah. If it goes 6, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be surprised if it goes 7. I'm taking the Warriors in 6.
Warriors in 6.
If it goes 7, yeah, I'm going Warriors in 6.
Okay,
so
we've heard it here first. Alan Malai, Warriors in 6. Buddy, we're going to have you on more. Thanks a ton for joining us, and thank you for giving BYU a little love. Hopefully, between you and Barry Switzer, we can get the Cougs in the Big 12.
Let's do it, man. Nothing would make me happier.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Okay, see you, Sean.
Alan Malai, everybody. That was a great interview. We're definitely going to have him on the podcast more, but really cool insight there on his take as to why BYU belongs in the Big 12. And he does have some really cool thoughts on complete and total realignment of conferences throughout the entire country. It's a very, very tall order, but it's actually a cool theory. We'll have him on another time to talk about that. But BYU belongs in the Big 12. The Big 12 needs BYU. BYU also needs the Big 12. So it's a match made in heaven. Let's just make it happen, baby. But we're running out of time on today's podcast, but I want to thank all you guys for listening and ask you to please check out the website, stbsportstake.com, but especially check out our social media, at Sean Bingham on Twitter, SeanBingham, but then Instagram, we're just going with STB Sports Take. It's really cool stuff. Check it out. My prediction for tonight, I'm going to say the Heat win tonight, and they win Game 7 as well, and they win that series 4-3, and then they lose to the Cavs in 5. Peace!
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we